Two women, one genre, a silent battle in art history. Art history tells us a comforting story. It says that greatness is loud, that revolutions announce themselves, that the most important artists are impossible to ignore. But what if some of the most powerful revolutions happened in silence? At the turn of the 17th century, Europe was full of painters. Men filled academies. Men painted heroes, myths, and kings. Men signed their names boldly at the bottom of canvases. And women? Women were expected to disappear. They were denied training, denied recognition, denied history itself. Yet two women refused to vanish, not with protest, not with violence, but with bowls of fruit. In different parts of Europe, two artists began painting objects that were supposed to be insignificant: glass, metal, food. Still life was considered decoration, not serious art. But these women saw something else. They saw a loophole. One worked in Milan. Her name was Fede Galizia. Her paintings were calm, precise, almost mathematical, nothing out of place, nothing excessive. She hid her power in balance and control. The other worked in Antwerp. Her name was Clara Peters. Her paintings were bold, reflective, unavoidable. She placed herself inside her work, sometimes literally. She refused to be invisible. They never met. They never spoke. But across borders, they were fighting the same war. A war against silence, a war against erasure. This was not a battle of armies. It was a battle of choices. One chose restraint. The other chose assertion. One whispered. The other left fingerprints. And here is the question. History never asked, which strategy was stronger, to disappear into perfection or to force the world to see you? Because both women succeeded. Both were respected in their lifetimes. Both were collected. Both were admired. And yet, both were forgotten. Their paintings survived. Their names did not. Until now. Tonight, we place them face to face, not to declare a winner, but to understand something deeper: how women survived in a world that did not want them to exist as artists. This is Fede Galizia versus Clara Peters, a silent rivalry, a shared struggle, and a forgotten chapter of art history. If you're ready, step closer, because sometimes the quietest battles change history the most. A world that was not built for women artists. The late 16th and early 17th centuries were not simply difficult for women who wanted to paint. They were hostile. Art was power. Art was money. Art was influence. And nearly all of it belonged to men. Formal art education was controlled by academies, institutions that defined what real art was and who was allowed to create it. Women were excluded, not occasionally, not unofficially, systematically. They were barred from life-drawing classes, especially from studying the nude human body, the very foundation of history painting, mythological scenes, and religious epics. Without access to the human form, women were locked out of the most prestigious genres. History painting sat at the top of the artistic hierarchy. Battles, heroes, biblical narratives, classical myths. These were the works that brought fame, royal commissions, and immortality. Women were denied all of it, not because they lacked talent, but because society decided they should not look, should not study, and should not compete. Portraiture was sometimes permitted, often restricted to family or domestic settings, but even that space was limited. Large commissions went to men. Public monuments went to men. Legacy followed men. For women artists, every door seemed closed, except one: still life. At the time, still life was considered minor art, decorative, domestic, unimportant. It involved objects, fruit, flowers, food, tableware, not bodies, not gods, not kings. And because it was dismissed, it became accessible. This is the paradox. The genre that history ignored became the genre that allowed women to exist as artists at all. Still life required no nude models, no academies, no public approval, only skill and discipline and patience. Within this narrow space, women could experiment. They could master light, texture, reflection, composition. They could prove technical brilliance without ever being invited into the grand narrative of art. And some of them became extraordinary. But make no mistake, this was not freedom, it was survival. Women artists were forced to compress their ambition into bowls of fruit and polished silver. They had to speak quietly, indirectly, symbolically, and yet that quiet space produced innovation. Across Europe, without collaboration, without shared workshops, two women began doing something remarkable. They elevated still life from decoration to meaning, from background to statement. In Milan, within the intellectual restraint of Italian art, one woman approached still life with balance, philosophy, and silence. Her name was Fede Galizia. In Antwerp, in a culture obsessed with trade, objects, and material wealth, another woman approached still life with confidence, reflection, and presence. Her name was Clara Peters. They did not know each other. They did not influence each other directly, yet they responded to the same restrictions in radically different ways. One chose restraint, the other chose assertion. One disappeared into perfection, the other inserted herself into the image. This historical context matters because it explains something essential. Their rivalry was not personal, it was structural. It was shaped by a world that allowed women only a narrow strip of creative ground, and then judged them for standing on it. What we are about to see is not simply a comparison of two artists. It is a comparison of two survival strategies within a system designed to erase them. And that is why Fede Galizia versus Clara Peters is not just an art story, it is a historical one. Fede Galizia did not paint loudly. She did not shock the viewer with excess, nor overwhelm the eye with chaos or emotion. Instead, she chose control. Her still lifes are built with precision. Every object feels deliberate. Every fruit is placed with intention. Every reflection is measured. Nothing in her compositions is accidental. This sense of control comes from her early training as a miniaturist, a discipline that demanded patience, absolute focus, and mastery over the smallest details. Where others sought drama, Galizia sought balance. Her paintings are quiet. They do not beg for attention. They do not announce meaning. They wait. And in that waiting, they ask the viewer to slow down, to look closer, to notice what might otherwise be missed. This silence is not emptiness. It is restraint. Look closely at her still lifes. Fruit appears ripe, but never exaggerated. Glass vessels reflect light softly without distortion. Metal surfaces are present, but never dominate the scene. Everything exists in harmony. This harmony is philosophical. Galizia's work carries the influence of vanitas symbolism, the subtle reminder that beauty fades, that time passes, and that all perfection is temporary. But she never spells this out. There are no skulls, no broken objects, no dramatic warnings. Her message is embedded in detail. A slight bruise on an apple, a leaf beginning to curl, a reflection that feels almost too perfect. These are not decorations, they are ideas. In a world where women artists were expected to remain invisible, Galizia embraced invisibility as a form of power. She did not insert herself into her paintings. She left no self-portrait hidden in reflections. Instead, she allowed the work itself to carry her presence. Her authorship is felt, not seen. This choice was radical in its own way. By refusing spectacle, Galizia demanded respect on technical grounds alone. She did not ask the viewer to admire her identity. She asked them to admire her mastery. Philosophy in Galizia's work is not expressed through words or symbols. It is expressed through discipline, through control over nature, through order imposed on chaos. Her still lifes suggest that meaning does not need to shout to be understood. Fed Galizia believed that art could think, that a bowl of fruit could hold an idea, that silence could communicate truth, that precision could be emotional. And in choosing control, silence, and philosophy, she created works that remain timeless, not because they demand attention, but because they reward it. In the silent world she painted, nothing moves, and yet everything speaks. Clara Peters did not disappear into her paintings. She entered them. In a world that rarely allowed women to sign their names, Peters found another way to claim authorship. She hid herself in plain sight. If you look closely at her still lifes, you will see it. A tiny reflection in a silver plate, a distorted image in the curve of a goblet, a face looking back at the viewer, her face. This was not vanity, it was assertion. Peters' paintings are bold. Metal objects dominate the composition. Knives cut across space. Goblets catch light aggressively. These are not passive arrangements. They demand attention, and that demand is intentional. Where Fede Galizia whispered, Clara Peters spoke clearly. Her still lifes are about presence, about claiming space in a visual culture that constantly tried to erase women. Every reflection says, I was here. This work has an author. Her choice of objects is not accidental. Knives suggest precision and authority. Metal reflects truth and distortion. Bread and cheese represent daily life, but also sustenance, labor, and survival. Together, these objects create tension, not silence. Peters worked in Antwerp, a city shaped by trade, wealth, and material exchange. Objects mattered, and Peters understood this world deeply. She painted luxury not to celebrate it, but to control it, to dominate it. Unlike many women artists of her time, Clara Peters often signed her paintings. This alone was an act of courage. Signing meant visibility. Visibility invited judgment. She accepted both. Her still lifes are not neutral. They confront the viewer. They say, look at the objects, now look closer, now look at me. Identity in Peters' work is not hidden in symbolism. It is declared through reflection, through composition, through confidence. She did not wait for permission. She inserted herself into the narrative of art, one reflection at a time. This strategy carried risk. Visibility makes erasure more violent. And yet Peters chose to be seen. In doing so, she expanded the language of still life. She turned objects into mirrors. She transformed domestic scenes into statements of existence. Clara Peters did not ask history to remember her quietly. She demanded to be recognized. And even when her name faded for centuries, her presence remained, staring back at us from polished silver and curved glass. In her world, still life was not still at all. It was alive. At first glance, Fede Galizia and Clara Peters appear to be doing the same thing. They both painted still life. They both worked in the same era. They both navigated a world that did not want women to succeed as artists. But beneath the surface, their approaches could not be more different. Training and beginnings. Fede Galizia grew up inside art. She was trained by her father, a miniaturist, in an environment where discipline and precision were essential. Her education emphasized control, patience, and perfection. Clara Peters, by contrast, had no documented artistic lineage. She had to construct her path alone, learning not through inheritance but through observation, persistence, and risk. One inherited structure, the other invented strategy, artistic philosophy. Galizia believed in silence. Her paintings communicate through balance, through restraint, through the suggestion that meaning does not need spectacle. Her still lifes feel philosophical, meditations on time, decay, and impermanence. Peters believed in presence. Her paintings confront the viewer, using reflection and bold composition to assert identity in a culture that erased women. Where Galizia hides, Peters declares. Technique and composition. Galizia's technique is controlled and symmetrical. Every object is carefully positioned. Every surface is refined. Nothing disrupts the calm. Peters' compositions are dynamic. Knives cut across space. Metal objects dominate. Reflections distort and multiply. Her work is about tension, not serenity. Authorship and identity. Galizia rarely signs herself into her paintings. Her authorship is intellectual, embedded in mastery rather than visibility. Peters signs often, sometimes literally, sometimes through reflection. She insists on being seen. This difference defines their rivalry. Survival strategies. Galizia survives by disappearing into perfection. Peters survives by refusing invisibility. Both strategies work. Both carry cost. Silence risks erasure. Visibility invites resistance. Legacy. Both women were respected in their lifetimes. Both were forgotten later, not because they lacked brilliance, but because history prefers loud stories. Together they reveal something crucial. There is no single way to survive inside a system designed to erase you. Final verdict. This is not about who was better. It is about how women adapted. Galizia shows us the power of restraint. Peters shows us the power of assertion. Two paths, one cage, and both left marks on art history that can no longer be ignored. When we place Fede Galizia and Clara Peters side by side, the question is not who was greater. The question is how they survived, because neither woman was meant to succeed in the world they were born into. They were denied education, denied recognition, denied a place in history, and yet both endured. Fede Galizia chose control. She trusted discipline, balance, and silence. She believed that perfection itself could be a form of resistance. She disappeared into her work, allowing mastery to speak where identity could not. Her paintings ask us to slow down, to think, to reflect on time, decay, and fragility. Clara Peters chose presence. She refused invisibility. She inserted herself into metal and glass, forcing the viewer to acknowledge her existence. Her work confronts us. It declares authorship. It says, "I was here." Where Galizia whispered, Peters insisted. Neither strategy was easy. Silence risks being forgotten. Visibility invites opposition. And in the end, history punished both. Their works survived. Their names faded. But today, that silence is breaking. By revisiting their art, we correct something larger than a footnote. We expose a system that forced women to choose between disappearing into perfection or fighting to be seen. Fede Galizia and Clara Peters were not minor artists. They were pioneers. They transformed still life from decoration into meaning, from background into voice. This is why their rivalry matters. Not because one defeated the other, but because together they reveal how much history chose not to see. And once you see them clearly, you cannot unsee them. History forgot these women, but now it has no excuse. If stories like this matter to you, like, subscribe, and help bring forgotten voices back into history.